Thank you very much. Now, I had the pleasure of working with Michelle Obama on her Let's Move initiative, and it gave me a little idea now. Let's move. So we still have a couple more speakers before lunch. I just want everyone to stand up, stretch your bodies, right? You know, come on, a little. I'm afraid if I tried to do yoga, I'd just get stuck on the floor and I wouldn't be able to get up. But I think it's just good to move. Okay, thanks, guys. I believe Liz is coming up next. Liz Taylor. No, I'm told no. Can the people who are out in the hinterlands come more into? We have seats at the tables for you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Taylor, and I, as you know from the multiple times I've already been introduced, am the chair of FAPAC. Yeah, I need that. And so if you could take your seats, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about FAPAC. And I'm waiting for the clicker so I can actually show my slides. So as soon as I get that, I will start. And I just wanted to point out to those of you standing over there, if you want to sit down, there's some more chairs also being added to tables over here on this side of the auditorium. So, okay.
I'll give you that one so you can go backwards too. So green goes forward, red goes back.
Okay, great. Okay. So FAPAC is the Food and Agriculture Policy Advisory Committee of the State Department of Agriculture. And as you can see from my first slide, we're tasked with making recommendations to the Arizona Department of Agriculture to address food access issues throughout the state. Mark spoke earlier about how we started and what our mission is. And I'm going to tell you basically two things in this talk about what we do. Every year, we write a letter, and every year or so, I think we're decided pretty much it's going to be on a 2-year cycle now, we organize this event, the Arizona Food Summit. So that's my talk. And you're all sitting here thinking, well, is she going to walk off the stage now? And the answer is no. I'm going to share with you some of the details of what we do. And the first thing I want to do is something that Mark did earlier, but I want to do it in a slightly different way. I want to introduce our FAPAC members. And the reason I want to introduce them is that this isn't just a random group of people. That's one of the powerful parts of having a committee like FAPAC within the state. This is a group of people who have worked on food access for many, many years and bring a whole bunch of different skill sets and perspectives and ideas to this issue from all over our state and from all kinds of different communities. I'll start by telling you that I'm from northern Arizona. I live in Flagstaff. And I've probably the least experienced person on this committee. I got involved in working on food system work about 10 or 12 years ago because I thought there should be a garden in every school and there ought to be community gardens in Flagstaff that people could grow food in. I thought that food was a fun and important thing to eat and enjoy. I had a daughter in graduate school who was learning about food systems, and she inspired me. I've been a longtime gardener and a botanist. I love plants, and I thought, wow, this would be something I could work on that would bring our community together. And now remember, my focus was on gardening and growing plants. But what I learned in the process of doing this work is how essential and vital food is. I knew that, but I think it was going into those school gardens and into those community gardens and understanding who the people who were there that really inspired me to start thinking about food access. So let me start by introducing you once again to Sharma Torrens. Sharma's gonna, I think she was sitting over there, but now she's somewhere else. There she is, way over there. She's going to give a talk to us about the work that she does on land conservation and making sure there's enough land for farmers to grow food. And she also works passionately on conservation issues for farmers through some of the state and USDA programs in Arizona. Then I'd like to reintroduce you to Dave Richens, who's over there. He's on the FAPAC. He works for one of the big food banks as part of the Arizona Food Bank Network, and he's going to be giving a talk in the next 2 days about food waste, which food banks are starting to work on and are very concerned about. He's going to be part of a group that does that. Then there's Rafael Tapia, who introduced our last speaker. Thank you, Rafael. And he works with Partners with Native Americans, which is a nonprofit group which supports tribes within the state. And so when tribes need something, they often go to PWNA to ask for help, whether it's food or other supplies. And Rafael and the organization he works for do that. His boss is here. There he is, back. And he's going to be giving the next talk and telling us what their perspective is on COVID and how it's affected them. I'm going in reverse alphabetical order. So Glenna McCullum is right here in the front. She's a really well-known and active nutritionist in the state. She's also worked really hard with the Center for Rural Leadership. And she's impacted the lives of many rural leaders, getting them connected, and has 2 political activity in the government here in the state, and is passionate about what we eat. She invites anyone who's interested in becoming a rural leader to come talk to her over at her spot right there at that table. Elise Guides, who I don't think is in the room today, she is, you are, yes, I didn't see you. I was so focused on what I was doing, is another member. And you've just done a really critical study on WIC, as I recall. No? Shout it out, I need help with this.
It's a technical report on online SNAP and how retailers can SNAP.
Okay, so it's a technical report on online SNAP and how critical it is. Is that a fair paraphrase? Because I missed the end of here. And so please seek her out and talk to her. She can join us today, and then she's going to be traveling. So I'm very excited that you're here. Bruce Gwynn is online. So hi, Bruce, if you can hear me and see me. He lives down in Yuma, and his daily life revolves around getting food to the food bank in Yuma. And so he can share his knowledge of the Yuma agriculture system and the food banks in how they operate in Yuma. And he's devised this whole incredible way to glean from the fields in Yuma and make that food available to the food bank. And then last but not least is Patty Emmert, who is sitting over there next to Elise. And Patty has been working with Slow Food. She's been working with Farm to School. She has been a very important contributor from here in Phoenix to food system work in Phoenix. And she's been doing this for years. And I forgot to say that Elise is from the southern part of the state and has traveled to get here today. So we appreciate that too. Okay. So that's who these people are and that I get to be on this committee with. And I'd like to say that that's part of the importance of having our committee in place, is that we're not just some people who have gotten together or care about this, that the other people on the committee, besides me, know about food issues and they want to work on them. And they very much want to work on food access and food security. And people use the term interchangeably, so I thought I would be the first person at this conference who would just note that the way I think about food security is that food security means that every member of a household has access at all times to enough food for an active, healthy life. At a minimum, food security includes ready availability of healthy, safe, nutritious foods. So that's our focus. And what I want to do is tell you a little bit about the letter that we write. And we write a letter that has 3 parts. In this letter, we make recommendations to the Arizona Department of Agriculture about ways to address this issue of food access. We point out first, as you can see on the slide, the legislative priorities for the coming session. The second thing we do is we let the director know what initiatives are coming up this year. Maybe they're not going to be addressed through policy or through legislation, but they're important to the people across the state. They're coming up this year and possibly the year beyond. And then we keep a track of a whole bunch of topics that come up again and again. Some topics have stayed on that list for a number of years now, but eventually they'll probably come off them as people see ways to address them that we can and figure out how to actually act on them. And what we do is we have a series of meetings. They're all open to the public. Everyone in this room can come to our meetings if you would like to. We've been doing them online lately because of COVID. And we work with the organizations within the state who work on food access. So at our meetings, the Arizona Food Bank Network presents, Local First Arizona, which works on economic development and food access, particularly in rural areas, but also in urban ones as well, presents and lets us know what they're doing. The Arizona Food System Network, which is producing a food plan for our state, the first one that the state has had. Adrian will be talking about that later today. After lunch. Angie Rogers from the Food Bank Network is going to be also talking after lunch about how they see food access and food issues in the state. We work with the Arizona Department of Education's Farm and School Program. Patty's organization, Slow Food Through Patty, has kept us abreast of what they're doing to address school food issues and make fresh grown local produce available to schools in Phoenix. We talk with Raphael and we find out from him what Project with Native Americans is doing as well. We take all this information, as well as information from the State Department of Agriculture itself as to what they see the burning issues are, and we combine them into our letter. And I'll just give you an example of what we did in 2021, since the Arizona legislature is meeting right now, and most of the organizations that we work with have decided not to be that active this year in proposing legislation. In 2021, we recommended that these 4 items were to strengthen the capacity and build resilience for Arizona's food banks, support and expand Friends of the Farm, support the SNAP fruit and veggie match appropriation, which is called Doubled Up Food Bucks, and support the creation of an agriculture workforce development program. The Arizona Food Bank Network ran the first 2 pieces of legislation, and Pinnacle Prevention, which houses the Arizona Food System Network, ran the other two pieces of legislation. And they were successful. Funding was appropriated for these programs, and the Agricultural Workforce Development Program was created. So those are our primary recommendations. But then we have these kinds of recommendations, which are sort of developing ones. And I want to say that I've highlighted the ones in yellow that people are actually talking about at this food summit. First of all, we've been talking about with the department that there's a need to assess, strengthen, and expand agricultural land retention and protection efforts in Maricopa County. It's a pilot program for the rest of the state to make sure that expensive farmland isn't converted into housing, but instead remains as farmland. Sharma will be talking about her work on this, and then Daniel Corral, who's here, is going to be presenting on her efforts to create a group to work on this and eventually bring forward legislation to address this issue in a statewide context. Strive, which is a program that Raphael has worked with exclusively with the PWNA, is a program that will be talked about in the next talk, which is to connect, discuss, and share relevant issues related to indigenous food systems. And Strive was run very much during COVID, along with other efforts that indigenous people made to make sure, and that we supported, to make sure that everyone knew what was happening for indigenous communities in terms of food access during COVID. And finally, the fifth item that I have checked off up there is to support a proclamation to declare October the Farm to School Month in the state of Arizona. Arizona has no legislation or no record of legislation that has ever supported farm to school. And I think that's a shame. Before COVID, we were on track to ask Governor Ducey to declare October Farm to School Month and to organize, in support of that, a lot of activities that would highlight that month for children and their families in Arizona. And we are going to continue to do that now that we can be together again and be in the same room, and in support of the work that the Farm to School program is doing through the Department of Education. And we'll be having a presentation about that as well. So if you look at your list of presenters, you'll see that that's going on too. Then finally, there's a long list of things that are important for the department to think about, but it's unclear how to solve them, what we should do. And so I've put them up there and highlighted all of them, because in one way or another, most of them are probably going to be addressed by presenters in this room. But they're also going to be thought about by people in this room. So take a look at them, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. One of the things that I just mentioned was that we're going to have a session on improving the rates of food recovery, or eliminating food waste. That's the first check up there. Dave and others are going to be doing that. Another thing I have checked up there, for example, is that for farmers markets need to be identified and treated as essential services during times like COVID, when we have an insecure food supply. Well, I'm ashamed to admit that Flagstaff would not allow its farmers market to happen during COVID because it occurred on city property. And because it was on city property, and the policies about city property and employee exposure were quite clear, they mitigated against the farmers market being able to be held on city property. finally, during COVID, the farmers market started being held in a different location, and it worked out. But essential services are essential services, and food is something that is essential. So we have to be able to provide people access to food in times of emergency, and this is a small policy issue that needs to be worked out within the city of Flagstaff. So moving into our other task, which I'm very excited that you're all participating in today, and I thank you very much for coming, and I want to thank everyone online for being part of this as well. Please think about your experience during COVID. I know it's difficult to think about, but one of the things we talked about when we were creating this summit was what the impacts of COVID have been on the food system. And we chose a metaphor of navigation. And the idea was that you need to know where you are to be able to determine where you're going. And so my first question to you is, where are we? Where are we now? We're hopefully, sort of, maybe coming out of COVID. We can be here today with one another, which is fabulous. We can do in-person meetings again. We can talk to each other. I think that talking in person is great, although you can have meaningful conversations over Zoom as well, because I've had them. So where are we? What do we know from our experiences during COVID? And where do we need to be? How are we going to take these experiences and move them forward and change the way we interact with and think about the world? And then how do we get there? It's not enough to say, here we are, and here's where I think we want to be. The due point, there's, I think what Director Killian said, and every other speaker this morning, is we actually want to do something, not talk about what we can do. We actually need to make things happen and to do things. And that's why I'm so excited that you're here in this room today and tomorrow, and the people online have joined us as well, to help us think through these things so the work that we do has meaning and significance for everyone who lives in this state and helps us create a better food system. So what have we learned from COVID? What were the surprises? What are the painful truths and memories? I think we all have them. What were the amazing innovations that you saw happen that made the difference, that you didn't think people could pull off or do, or you never even thought about before COVID occurred? And what else do you know that we need to know? And I'm asking you this emphatically because that's what we're working on now. That's what FAPAC is producing. We're not just sitting here and talking at you or even with you. What we're doing in our food summits is we are asking you for your opinions, your solutions, and your input so that we can capture it all, record it all, share it back with you, give you the opportunity to reflect on it, and create a document that we can share with Director Killian that will help us move forward for the next work that we're all doing on food systems and food access here in the state of Arizona. So thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you today.